I lock mine. Um, Still continuing in a series in Job. Slowly getting there. It's 36 chapters or something. We're about 4 hours, so I'm not doing too bad. We'll get there. So if you've got your Bibles, Job chapter 14. I shouldn't drink coffee before I get up here. So we'll just read through chapter 14 and we'll break. There's man that is born of a woman is a few days and full of trouble. He cometh forth like a flower and is cut down. He fleeth also as a shadow and continueth not. Thus thou open thine eyes upon such an one, and bringeth me unto judgment with thee. Who can bring a clean thing out of an unclean? Not one. Seeing his days are determined, the number of his months are with thee. Thou hast appointed his bounds that he cannot pass. Turn from him that he may rest, till he shall accomplish as an hireling his day. For there is hope of a tree, if it be cut down, that it will sprout again, and that the tender branch thereof will not cease. Though the root thereof wax old in the earth, and the stock thereof die in the ground. Yet through the scent of water it will bud, and bring forth boughs like a plant. But man dieth and wasteth away. Yea, man giveth up the ghost, and where is he? As the waters fail from the sea, and the flood decayeth and drieth up. So man lieth down and rises not, till the heavens be no more. They shall not awake, nor be raised out of their sleep. Oh, that thou wouldest hide me in the grave, that thou wouldest keep me secret until thy wrath be past, that thou wouldest appoint me a set time and remember me. If a man die, shall he live again? All the days of my appointed time will I wait till my change come. Thou shalt call, and I will answer thee, and thou wilt have a desire to the work of thine hands. For now thou numberest my steps. Dost thou not watch over my sin? My transgression is sealed up in a bag, and thou sewest up mine iniquity. And surely the mountain falling cometh to naught, and the rock is removed out of his place. The waters wear the stones. Thou washest away the things which grow out of the dust of the earth, and thou destroyest the hope of man. Thou prevailest forever against him, and he passeth, and thou changest his countenance, and sendest him away. His sons come to honour, and he knoweth it not, and they are brought low, but he perceiveth it not of them. But his flesh upon him shall have pain, and his soul within him shall mourn. That's great. Dear Lord, Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this night, Lord, and we thank you for the freedom we have just to gather around your word. I ask now you just guide me and speak through me, Lord, and you would just help me to say those things that you would have me to say, Lord. Just give us a good night, Jesus. So, chapter 14 is sort of the last part of his argument against his friends. So, quick recap. Obviously, Job. So Satan basically challenges God that Job only worships him because of the gifts that God has given him. So we know that God takes up that challenge, and Job is tested. And first of all, his riches and everything that he has, his children are taken from him. And then Satan's given a little bit more power and is allowed to touch Job physically and harm him, up until the point that he's not allowed to kill him, though he's restricted. Job is brought low by this, and then in what you would think would be a calming and helpful, his friends show up. And instead of being that rock that he can count on, um, they don't do a very good job. They really tear him down. They accuse him of sin and iniquity, and really stick it to him that basically the only reason he's in this position is because of the secret sin that he has in his life. And they basically told him that unless he confesses this sin, that it was not going to get better and it was all going to get worse. So they basically had come to the two conclusions that everything that has happened to Job up until this point was because of his sin. And that Job wasn't wise enough to deal with this himself. He needed or required the wisdom of man as opposed to the wisdom of God. They chose to speak for themselves. They don't seek God's wisdom in any of this. And this is basically the chapter 12, 13, and 14 is Job's sort of rebuttal to this argument of these friends. In chapter 12, Job made a point of showing his friends that the wisdom that they had was not unique, but it was the same as what he had. He also makes a point of showing how powerful and wise God is, especially compared to their human wisdom and strength. He continued to rebuke his friends and calls upon God in chapter 13 to be his judge as opposed to them. Chapter 14, he gets a little bit lower and he begins to lament and really sort of challenge, lament about his condition and kind of look towards the future and where he's going to be. Remember, Job doesn't know about the challenge, he doesn't know why he's here. And I believe Job's starting to struggle with what his friends are saying. So he sort of starts off and Job acknowledges that man's life is short, it's troubled. So he says in verses 1 to 3, a man that is born of a woman is of few days and full of trouble. He cometh forth like a flower and is cut down. He fleeth also as a shadow and continueth not. And dost thou open thine eyes upon such an one, and bringeth me into judgment with thee. Now Job affirms that people are born to trouble. Life is short and full of hardship. Now this is true for those that are saved and unsaved, those that serve God and those that don't. It is the general experience of mankind that we are troubled. Ever since Adam and Eve, people good and bad have suffered in their lives. Now, this is not just true for Job, it is true for all people, including his friends. Man flourishes for a short time like a flower that grows and blooms, Job says. It serves its purpose, it gives some blessings to others, and then it dies and fades away as the shadows. So Job also likens a man's life to a shadow that appears and then flees away. He is soon gone. Man's life is frail. We're living in a cursed world. We are prone to all sorts of physical things, diseases and death. You only really need to read the newspaper to see how short life can be. If you stop and think about it, we really see the mercy of God in our lives protecting us sometimes. And Job also wonders why God will look at such as one of himself and bring him under judgment. Remember, his friends have challenged him with sin in his life, this secret sin. And he wonders why he's been brought to judgment because he doesn't understand the test that he's in. I don't know if you remember a few chapters ago we spoke about that Job's challenge would have been for nothing had he known the challenge. And his challenge is really that he doesn't know. He doesn't know why he's like this. And I said, when I said that, he would, had he known about this challenge, it would have made it worthless. He would have gone through this for nothing. So Job sort of sees his life as being short. He doesn't view himself as important enough for God to bother with judging. Now he's wondering once again why God chose to bring such suffering in his life. And secondly, Job asks God to give him a chance to rest from his misfortunes. He says, verse 4 to 6, he says, "Who can bring a clean thing out of an unclean? Not one. Seeing his days are determined, the number of his months are with thee. Thou hast appointed his bonds that he cannot pass. Turn from him that he may rest till he shall accomplish as an hireling his day." It's kind of struggled with, to be honest. So Job asks, who can bring something clean out of something unclean? And makes and responds to his own question by saying, not one. Now, it could either mean that all people suffer and die. So how can someone live life without suffering? Or that people will sin eventually, just like the people they came from. So I think with the context of this, that sort of all people, we all come from sinners, and we all are sinners. We're born in that sin nature, and so it seems to fit the context that Job will be talking about the sin nature that man is born with, in before and following on. Job says and continues on with saying that our days are numbered, and that God knows the number of those. So in verse 5, seeing these days are determined, the number of his months are with thee, thou hast appointed his bonds that he cannot pass. So man cannot exceed the limits God has set for him. His days are numbered. One thing that you can know for sure is you will not die before that God's allotted time for you. But it's scary to think sometimes how we don't know the time, we don't know how many days we have, and how many days we've been given. So there's sort of three things I sort of took away from this: that our life will come to an end, as Job says, and our days upon the earth are not numberless, are not endless, and can soon be finished. It is determined, like God knows our time. He knows how long we're going to live. And that's he understands that. He knows that. And that we cannot overthrow what God has determined. So many people try and there's so many things out there to extend one's life, but at the end of the day, no matter what you do, you'll never go past what God has determined your life. Okay, so Job really sums this up in this one verse, that all men basically sums it up as that to sum up these verses, basically all men will die at his appointed time, no sooner, no later. And so Job uses the illustration of a hireling. So long that we're here for so long. He asked God to give him a break as a hireling. So he says in verse 6, turn from him, that he may rest till he shall accomplish as an hireling his day. Job is asking God for a break from his suffering. He really is. He's, I believe, feeling forced down by that. He wants the end to come soon. And he asks sort of why can't he have that little piece? And so he asks in the verse, death will come like a hired man's day comes to an end. So he's looking at that hireling, like that man that would hire to look after a field, that he won't stay sort of longer than his time. He leaves, and he's sort of looking at it. He's wondering when his time would be that he can sort of not be so oppressed. So Job really pleads with God to sort of let the suffering on his life be sort of over. You know, he wants to sort of complete that day and be done. It's almost like it, you know, in the New Testament they talk about finishing the race. He just wants to sort of have the strength to sort of finish that and be done. And thirdly, Job asks a question of God. In sort of in an illustration, in verse 7 to 10, it says, "For there is hope of a tree if it be cut down, that it will sprout again. His tender branch thereof will not cease. Though the root thereof wax old in the earth, and the stalk thereof die in the ground, yet through the scent of water it will bud and bring forth boughs like a plant. But man dieth and wasteth away. Yea, man giveth up the ghost, and where is he?" And so Job uses this illustration of the tree. So when a tree is cut down, unless Bob's around, the tree still has hope of growing again. It shoots out, it still has its roots, and though the stump can appear dead, as long as the root is alive and the water conditions are right, it may yet grow again. And Job contrasts this to a man. When a man dies, when he breathes his last breath, when he's buried, what then? You know, what hope is there for him? You know, Job wonders about such questions. But doesn't seem to know the answers. You know, we know in the New Testament it teaches clearly the concept of the resurrection, and it's perfectly demonstrated through Christ. But at this early time, whether Job just doesn't reveal that he understands, he doesn't really continue on this. Job does not deny the concept of life after death. He doesn't cover whether the knowledge that he has of it. So he continues to compare man's life in verses 11 to 13. It says, "The waters fail from the sea, and the flood decayeth and drieth up. So man lieth down and rises not. Till the heavens be no more, they shall not awake, nor be raised out of their sleep. O that thou wouldest hide me in the grave, that thou wouldest keep me secret until thy wrath be past, that thou wouldest appoint me a set time and remember me. You know, a river that dries up has no purpose or use. Likewise, as water evaporates from the sea, it appears to be gone forever. So when a man dies, he lies down and rises no more. At least that is the observation of mankind. So such people will not be roused from their sleep from death till the end. Then comes the resurrection. But Job does not mention this here. So Job sought to go to the grave in order to rest from his suffering, which he was still believed to be caused by God's wrath. But he yet hoped that God would at some appointed time in the future remember him. So this seems to imply a hope in life after death. And perhaps a future opportunity to stand before God to understand why things happened as they did. He continues on in verse 14 and 15 to question a life after death. He says, "If a man die, shall he live again? And all the days of my appointed time will I wait till my change come. Thou shalt call, and I will answer thee. Thou wilt have a desire to the work of thine hands." So Job asks whether or not a man will live again after he dies. And I struggle with this because I'm not sure if he's not saying it or if he just doesn't have a clear understanding of this, of the resurrection, or the life after death. Now, this verse seems to imply that he has hope that he will rise again, though. And it says he will continue to wait, even though his work here is a time of hard service. Until that time of change comes, he says. And does this... I think he is referring to the resurrection here, but he doesn't specifically say that. God will call and Job will answer that call. And I think Job will Job seeks to understand why this has happened to him. Job seems to hope that after his life he'll have some type of opportunity for a favourable reward from God. And in the next few verses, Job hopes God will cover his sins. He says, "For now thou numbereth my steps, and dost thou not watch over my sin? My transgression is sealed up in a bag, and thou sealest up mine iniquity." Now Job says God numbers our steps. He records what man does. And Job is asking God not to keep a record of his sins. Job says his transgressions is sealed in a bag, and God covereth his iniquity. And the first part appears to mean that God has recorded and preserved his sins, so that record will permanently remain. If so, the covering of that iniquity in the last could mean not hiding it. Could mean not hiding it so it cannot be seen, but putting it in a protective coating so it is preserved for future reference. The other possibility is that it is sealed from Job so that he does not know what his sin is. It's unclear whether Job is expressing hope that God will hide his sins so they are not held against him, or whether he states a sense of hopelessness that God will preserve his errors and continue to hold them against him. The next few verses, however, seem to imply the hopelessness of the second alternative. As he goes on in verse 18, he says, "And surely the mountain falling cometh to naught, and the rock is removed out of this place. The waters wear the stones, thou washest away the things which go out of the dust of the earth, and thou destroyest the hope of man." Mountains gradually erode away, the rocks crumble and fall, Job says, being moved out of their place. The rain gradually wears away even seemingly solid stone. The floods wash away the soil. In the same way, Job claimed that God destroys man's hope. At first, he had hope of deliverance from his suffering and heartache, perhaps hope of life after death. But as time passed, Job seems to lose his hope. It is washed away. Job's hope faded the longer he continued to suffer, as I think anyone would. Job has not gone through the easiest thing. He's lost his family and everything he had. Don't get me wrong. Job has not sinned, but I think as anyone, he looks and he wonders what's going on, and he struggles with what he sees happening to him, and he can't understand why. And I think the hope that he loses is just the hope of the understanding. Finally, Job finishes his speech here. The lasting man dies, never to return to have any reward on earth. And he finishes up in verses 20 to 22. He says, "Thou prevailest forever against him, and he passeth. Thou changest his countenance, and sendest him away. His sons come to honour, and he knoweth it not. And they are brought low, but he perceiveth it not of them. But his flesh upon him shall have pain, and his soul within him shall mourn. Now Job continues speaking of man after death. Now God prevails against him so that they eventually die as God will. His countenance changes as he grows old and after he dies, and eventually he is sent away from life. Having died, his involvement in the affairs of earth have ended. This is a similar thought to that which we see in the book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verses 5 and 6 says, "For the living know that they shall die, but the dead know not anything. Neither have they any more a reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Also their love and their hatred and their envy is now perished. Neither have they any more a portion forever in anything that is done under the sun." He does not know what happens to his descendants after him. They may come to the favourable result of honour, or may come to defeat and loneliness. But either way, the Father does not know, because he is gone. Nevertheless, death will come, and with all the pain and grief attached to it. The body endures pain as it comes to death. The soul grieves that it suffers, and knowing it will suffer. Throughout it all is the knowledge that this is the way life will end. So Job ends a tragic expression of his views of life. Suffering has deeply affected his view. He's seeking a sign of hope from God, and he's struggling to find it. I said, in all this, I do not believe Job has sinned, but he finds himself low and in need of a friend, such that he does not have it this time. Unfortunately for Job, this is not what happens. It continues to get worse from here.